Imagine you are a builder's labourer in London. You wake before dawn, you work until dusk, and at the end of the day, someone drops a few coins into your hand. Here is the only question that has ever really mattered about those coins. What could they actually buy? Not how many there were, but what they were worth, in bread, in meat, in a roof over your head. We have the records to answer that. Tax rolls, college account books, hospital ledgers, 6 centuries of them. So let's do something simple and strange. Let's watch the value of a single day's work rise and fall across 600 years of London. This is the long series. A quick, honest note. This is written and narrated with AI. But none of the numbers are. Every figure you'll see comes from published economic history, and it's all sourced in the description below. To compare a wage in 1340 with a wage in 1840, we can't just count coins. Coins change. Prices change. So economic historians use a trick. They define a fixed shopping basket. The economist Robert Allen called it the respectability basket. Enough bread, beef, beer, fuel, clothing and rent for one person to live decently for a year. Then they ask one clean question for every year. How many of these baskets could a worker's annual wage buy? That number is the welfare ratio. One basket means you earned exactly enough to live respectably, with nothing spare. Below 1, you're falling short. Above 1, you have surplus, savings, a bigger family, a little comfort. Watch that one line, and you're watching the standard of living itself. We start around the year 1300. England is crowded, with more people than the land can comfortably feed. And when there are many workers and little spare food, wages buy very little. Our labourer is living at, or just below, 1 basket. He is, in the plainest sense, getting by and no more. Then, in 1348, plague reaches England. Within a couple of years, it kills something like 1/3 to 1/2 of the population. The popular story says, fewer workers, so survivors could demand higher pay, so everyone got rich. The first part is true. Wages, the number of coins, shot up, and so alarmed the ruling class that Parliament passed laws in 1351, trying to freeze pay at pre-plague rates. But look carefully at the line. In those first years, the real wage barely moves, and in some trades, it falls. Why? Because the plague also wrecked the economy that produced the goods. Prices spiked. Allen's index of prices rose around 1/4 in just 2 years. More coins chasing scarcer bread is not a raise. The windfall was real, but it was delayed. The payoff arrives later, and when it does, it is extraordinary. Through the late 1300s and across the 1400s, population stays low, land is abundant, and prices settle. Now the shortage of workers finally bites in the workers' favour. By the 1400s, our London labourer is earning well above 1 basket, by some estimates, around 50% more than he needs to live respectably if he can find work for the year. This is sometimes called the golden age of the English labourer. A working man in the 1400s, eating meat, drinking ale, with coin to spare. It will be the high water mark for centuries. Then it slips away. Across the 1500s, the population recovers and keeps climbing. More mouths, more workers competing for the same jobs, and a long inflation, the price revolution, driven partly by silver flooding in from the Americas. The line bends downward and keeps bending. By the early 1600s, the descendants of that comfortable 15th century labourer are back near a single basket, sometimes below it. 200 years of progress quietly handed back. But London is its own creature. As it swells into one of the great cities of the world, its wages pull above the rest of England's. A builder in London is paid more than a builder in the countryside, though London also charges more to live. This gap matters because it's part of a bigger argument that high wages in places like London made it worth inventing machines to replace expensive labor, cheap workers, and nobody bothers to mechanize. Expensive workers, and suddenly a machine starts to look like a bargain. Now I owe you something, because this channel only works if I'm honest about the evidence. For decades, these wages came from one main kind of record, the day rates written in the account books of colleges, cathedrals, and hospitals. But the historian Judy Stephenson asked a sharp question. Was that rate the money that actually reached the worker's hand? Often, she argued, no. That institution frequently paid a master craftsman or a contractor who then paid his men less and kept the difference. If she's right, some of the classic wage series are too high. Robert Allen pushed back, defending the broad shape of the trend. The debate isn't settled, so treat the level of any single year with humility. But the big story survives the argument. That's the difference between a number and a trend. Now to the most famous and most argued over stretch. The Industrial Revolution arrives in the late 1700s. Factories, steam, cities exploding in size. You'd expect the workers' line to leap. For a long time, it doesn't. For roughly the first 2 generations of industrialization, real wages for ordinary workers are close to flat, even as the economy's output races ahead. Historians call it the Engels pause, the gap between rising production and stagnant pay. The factories were producing staggering wealth. Very little of it was reaching the laborer's basket. Only from around the 1840s and 50s does the workers' line finally durably climb. And then it climbs in a way it never had before, breaking permanently above every previous peak, including that golden 15th century. Step back and look at the entire 600 years at once. It is not a staircase of steady progress. It's a mountain range, a low, crowded medieval valley, a sudden, violent climb after the plague, paid for in death. A long, sad slide down through the 15 and 1600s. A flat, smoky stretch through early industrialization that disappointed everyone living through it. And then, only at the very end, the climb that didn't stop, the one we are still standing on top of today. For most of this story, a London worker's children could fully expect to live no better than their grandparents. The idea that each generation rises is new. So what did a day's work buy? Sometimes a slow medieval poverty. Once, briefly, in the 1400s, real comfort. Then centuries of holding on. And finally, late and unevenly, more than any of them had ever known. The coins in our labourer's hand never changed much. What changed was the world's willingness to give him something for them. If you want to keep watching history measured instead of just told, a new data story every week, subscribe. Every source for this episode is in the description, including the wage series and the debate about them, so you can check the numbers yourself. Next time on the long series, what a loaf of bread cost across the same 6 centuries, and the riots that broke out when it cost too much. Thank you for watching.